Right, hello and welcome to Series 2, Episode 12 of the Mia and ADHD podcast. It's a brand new year and it's bringing some brand new things to the podcast. Well, I'm just trying to push my Linktree subscription, if I'm honest. So everyone who subscribes to my Linktree, not my social media accounts, you'll receive exclusive access to my new podcast website. You also get newsletters and information resources as well. Free of charge, obviously. I don't want your money. But you can send me chocolate because that will be good. I'm not going to lie. But the more subscribers I get, the more I can offer as well. So it'd be nice to be able to build that chilled community in a safe place for everyone involved, really. Today, we're going to be talking about dual or multiple diagnoses. I'm not quite sure what it is, but do we really need to have a diagnosis for all the different neurodivergent conditions that we struggle with, which could potentially be 2, 3, 4, or 5 or more, and the comorbidities that can arise from these as well. So there's a lot there potentially. So to help me, well, not to help me, but to discuss this question, I guess, is I brought back a really popular guest from season 1, Neurodiversity Advocate, Ally, and Consultant, and Nathyn Kerchhoff. Welcome back, Nathyn.
Yeah, man. How's it going, Dar?
Not too bad. How are you?
Really good, thank you, and thanks so much for having me back on the show. Really appreciate it.
That's all right. That's all right. That was a very long-winded beginning of the podcast there, but
Mm.
I couldn't stop
Heck,
myself.
I think it's worth it, and with all the work you're doing. So yeah.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Now, we recently sort of talked before Christmas about this. And we agree it's a good and interesting conversation to have. I think purely down to slightly different ways that we think about this. Um, Now, I will say to everyone this: my views are my views about myself, and this is what I said to Nathyn about how I feel about possible other diagnosis that would I or wouldn't I sort of chase up and go for. Um, but it's about whether you guys think the same thing and whether you've had this conversation with yourselves. I guess I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to these, so this is just a real conversation. So to get it started, then I think like ADHD and ASD, this topic is like a huge spectrum. Where there's a lot of external factors that will absolutely have an effect on how you view this topic and why you view it that way as well. So, do we really need to know everything about what's going on? This is for late diagnosed ADHDers, by the way. This is not for children in education. That is a whole different kettle of fish. I know I have one, completely different. So, that's the late diagnosed 20, 30, 40, 50 year olds plus. Do we need to know everything? What do you reckon?
Well, so touching on what you mentioned, then around, this is your personal view, this is your personal opinion on yourself and things. I think that's the main focus of this conversation as well, right? Is what does it do for me? What does it do for my journey? What does it do for my narrative and that going forward, right? And being as someone who touches on this conversation quite regularly with a number of friends, especially um, because they see a number of different traits within myself that I don't necessarily see in things, or that I always thought was just my combined ADHD, such and that. And now I'm learning that potentially I'm more on the ADHD spectrum, along with a little bit of dyslexia thrown in for a bit of extra spiciness and things and that. It Okay, so what does that change for me at this stage, right? What does that bring into my life? What does that mean for my business going forward? What does that mean for how I interact with people and things? And I think that's thinking a little bit too far. It should be brought back a little bit more into the realm of, okay, but what does it actually change for myself in the sense of my little sphere of a world and things and that? What
Yeah,
what does that do for me and my thinking and that, right? And it's the same as getting late diagnosed ADHD most people are these days and things like that. Obviously, as you know, I was diagnosed as a child, later re-diagnosed as an adult, and that because for some reason it disappears, and then we get re-diagnosed later on and things, all right? So I've always known that there was something, obviously vilified that growing up and things, and then getting that re-diagnosis, starting to try to learn more about myself and that. And it wasn't for anybody else. It was for a want of better understanding myself to be a better person within my kind of realm and that, my relationships, my work, my etc. That kind of thinking. So I'm still on that journey of still trying to understand what my ADHD means to myself
Yeah.
in a positive light. I know this is very controversial because a lot of people have a very negative interpretation of ADHD or, combined ADHD and things or any other neurodiversity kind of complexities and things. But for myself, I've been able to, through a lot of work, kind of differentiate what is ADHD, what is mental health, what is trauma, what is et cetera, and that, and kind of compartmentalize and morph into those kind of areas.
Yeah.
Now, if friends telling me, "Oh, but we see this inside," or "We see this within your actions," or "Have you noticed this about yourself and things?" And it's like, "Oh, I just turned 40, right? Okay, right?" And I'm like, I'm still getting to grips with the one.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool. It's not going to take me another 40 years to, get to grips with the next one or something as such and that. But I think it's the same as your first diagnosis or your second diagnosis or anything as such. It's affording yourself that space to understand yourself, right? Not necessarily change the world, not necessarily change how anything kind of interacts with you in the world and things like that, but it's allowing yourself to have an understanding of self and what you need to be able to feel fulfilled within your own life and within your own journey and that. Because if we don't know ourselves, if we don't know what we need, nobody else is going to, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and and this is going to be the struggle going forward in that. So yet again, as you said, this is about our own opinions and our own kind of beliefs and our own kind of community structures as such. And do you feel you need that second diagnosis or that journey path to a second diagnosis or anything as such? And I think the hard answer to that is that's an individual decision to have to make and things. It's what are you looking for from that? Because I think a lot of people get deterred when they're later diagnosed for the first time. They have this idea or this concept that, oh, a light bulb's going to go on once I get my diagnosis, right? And the world's going to change a little bit, and there's going to be all this help. Let's talk about the UK for now, right? There's going to be all of this help provided to us and things. And then once we get this diagnosis, there's going to be talking therapies thrown at us. There's going to be occupational health kind of services thrown at us, and it's not. The only thing that's available to us in the UK at this stage and that's through the NHS as assistance is medication. And that's a stretch, right? Because at the moment we still got medication shortages blamed on a number of different reasons and that. So even triation and medication and at this point and that is something that's difficult to obtain through the NHS. So there is no great big white light at the end of the tunnel of a diagnosis and that from any outside perspective and that. But what it does afford is that opportunity and that to one, talk from my opinion, forgive myself, learn about myself, and create a new narrative for myself going forward. Instead of the narrative that I've always kind of been led to believe what ADHD is or what ADHD looks like to everybody else, or potentially ADHD, which is obviously autism and ADHD combined and things and that. And then thrown in with that little sprinkle of dyslexia and things, which I'm kind of, I don't know if it's old age, and I apologize if two things right, or if it was dyslexia at this stage and things like that. But yeah, once someone kind of pointed that out, I started noticing how much I've been like, yeah, my words and things and that are a little bit twisted around and things and that, and it's been predictive text helping me out most of the time. So, yeah, to answer your question and things and that, in the short, I think you summed it up pretty quick and that in your first statement and that is it's up to the individual and what they're expecting out of life and what they're expecting from their own journey and their own narratives. And, what will it bring to them and what are the positives for them? And if you have a moment's thought of, this might afford me the opportunity to be able to kind of forgive myself a little bit because I've always thought X, Y, and Z, and I might be able to improve my narrative, then I can't see any harm in going out and doing it. Naturally, depending on who you go through the diagnosis or diagnoses, as you said earlier,
Yeah,
whether it's the NHS or whether you go private and things and that, obviously be aware that these do get put on files in places and things and that. So these are things that then will forever kind of follow you in that regards. And I'm not deterring you away from that in any sense. It's just, you know, we still have a long way to go through our health services to understanding neurodiversity and mental health and, the kind of accommodations that should be afforded around those things.
yeah. It's I mean, the one thing I've seen and learned through this is, I mean, everyone can have the same. If you want, I know this is bad terminology. The same symptoms as in ADHD. They're exactly the same ADHD wise. I know it's bad terminology, but I'm just painting a picture here. But what can make things different for everyone is I guess, the psychosocial aspects of life is everything, your surroundings, your age, friendships, family, kids, work, everything has input into how you deal and how you cope, your inattention, your dysregulation. You know what I mean? I mean, if you are single and you work from home and you got your own jobs, your own business, and all that, and you just do whatever it is, it's kind of cool. Your dysregulation probably isn't going to be a massive issue. But if you've got a high stress job and you've got a family and all this, your dysregulation is going to be more of an issue potentially. So there's a lot of other things that can really make a difference, and that has, I think, has a say in, how you think about this topic we're talking about now. Do you need to go further and find more knowledge, and is it going to help you in your job? Is it going to help you with just putting strategies in? you know um
I think you touched on a perfect topic there in regards to that. I think dysregulation is a good word to use, because so many people these days unfortunately combine mental health conditions with neurodiverse conditions and mix up the two. So a really good example is sort of like RSD, rejection sensitivity disorder. Um, that is not a neurodiversity specific condition as such. It is a dysregulation
yeah,
condition, usually caused by trauma or childhood trauma or something as such that you've experienced through life. But what does happen in a neurodiverse person is obviously we have that dysregulation of emotional states and things and that, which everybody has, but we just experience things a little bit more extreme, unfortunately, right? So that's not something that's specific to us, that kind of RSD or heartbreak or whatever else you want to kind of bring into it. And it's more the dysregulation of it, right? The kind of extremity or extremeness of it in a sense and that, right? And it's a really big topic because nobody talks about it, especially from a mental health perspective or a neurodiversity diagnoses perspective and things. And it's one of the least spoken about element of that journey, right? So when you touch on whether or not a person's working alone at home or whether they're working in an office and that where they're overstimulated, all day long, and then they come home to either a quiet house or a family home or a super busy, packed, still living with parents home or something as such, and that, it's how is that controlled for them? What do we do? And I think this is more so where the diagnosis comes into play for ourselves rather than for other people. Is yes, other people can make accommodations for us, but I think it starts with ourselves first in the sense that it can help us to build a self-awareness,
yeah,
right? So I know, for example, when I used to work in the office, right, or even when I work for myself for a company in a home office and things, I used to be terror from 5 o'clock till 7 p.m. you did not want to be around me, right? And I probably did not want to be around myself, right? Because you spend the whole day masking, right? Whether it be on video calls and things and that, or in an office space and around people and things and that, you're wearing 10 different masks, plus you're doing your day job, plus you're just trying to manage yourself and your own stimulation, overstimulation and things like that. And then you're coming home to a safe environment, and all feel you're doing all day is clenching your teeth, right? And trying to kind of manage what all of that noise is doing to you, and then you step into a nice, quiet, safe environment. What do we do, right? Now, we see this in children as well and things like that, usually when they're in safe environments, and I don't think it goes away when we become adults and that, right? We tend to get rowdy in our safest zones and things and that because that's where we feel safe to be able to kind of like just release and let go. But how fair is that on a partner? How fair is that on us, your family or mom, dads, etc., and things like that? So if we have a diagnosis and we have the right kind of tools alongside it, what that helps us do is build that self awareness to be okay, cool. From 5 to 7 p.m. every day, right? We're gonna be a little bit annoying. We're gonna be a little bit loud. We're gonna be whatever, right? I'm gonna tell myself I'm gonna go for a walk after it. As you can see, it's probably not me. I'm a little bit bigger. So I'm going to jump on the computer, so I'm going to game with my friends. I'm going to jump on with some friends and things and that. It's going to be noisy a little bit and that, but it's going to take me out of that headspace. And it's just going to help me to kind of de-stress. Now, I don't think this is different from neurotypical people either, right? Everyone has tough days, hard days, and overstimulated days, whether you're neurodiverse or neurotypical. It's just the extremeness of that kind of feeling and the multitude of masks that we have to wear on a day that separates us.
Yeah.
And through a diagnosis, and it doesn't work for everybody, but through a diagnosis, it gives us the opportunity to learn more about ourselves. What do we need to be able to handle that? And what do we need in that to be able to better manage ourselves? Or I don't know if manage is the right word. I, I think that's a little bit mean to ourselves. To better enjoy life, to better, not feel like we're such an impact on people around us and things. Because let's be real, neurodiversity isn't always the easiest thing to be around and things. I mean, ADHD gets that badge every other day, unfortunately, in that.
Yeah.
Um, and if we don't know ourselves, how can we expect others to kind of be there for us or to help bring in accommodations or to help bring in, different narratives and that to better understand if we're not going to be able to help them do so. So if we're talking medication wise and things, that's a whole other kettle of fish. I don't know. Maybe we leave that for another time and things and that. But we could probably talk a few segments on that. But again, no one size fits all. And like you said, you can put 10 ADHDs in a room. We're all going to be different, right? We're still an individual at the end of the day, and we still have our own individual life experiences as such and things and that, right? So out of those 10 people and things, are we all going to have only ADHD? Are we going to have trauma? Are we going to have chronic pain? Are we going to have mental health issues and things that? Are we going to potentially have another neurodiverse complexity or diagnosis waivers down the road and things that potentially? But out of those 10 and things and that, it's up to each and every individual now to make a decision for themselves and that. How much do they want to know about themselves? How much do they want to learn more about their own narratives and that, and what they can do to change kind of their journey down the road?
Yeah. You said before about the self awareness, and I think that is really the point of it all. Really. I mean, I remember I got assessed for ASD to begin with, and at that point in the journey, I didn't know anything about anything. So I remember, them asking me questions, and the way I answered the questions was quite. I mean, I didn't really know how to think about the questions they were asking me, about my day to day, did I have certain routines and things like that. I really never really thought about it. Um, and it was quite hard to do and hard to answer the questions. And it came back as I'm not autistic. There are traits there, but you know, um, but when I had the ADHD assessment further down the line, after a ton of research about everything, I was better equipped to understand the questioning and how to then look at my life and kind of dissect my life. So it was then easier to answer the questions truthfully and in full as well. Even to simple things like, they ask you, are you disorganized? I mean, my head says, well, I'm not disorganized. However, I know for about 20 years, 30 years maybe, I've put certain things in place naturally. Like, I got reminders on my phone that go off all out through the day to remind me of things. And that is why I'm not disorganized, because I have procedures in place. So I realize that now, without my phone and without these things going off, I will be a mess. Um, but I didn't really think about that beforehand, but I do sort of now. So it's that kind of like awareness. And I was diagnosed ADHD, and I am on medication, and and through all the research now, that self awareness has grown a lot.
If I can touch on that quickly, and I just before we move forward, I think you brought up a really valid thing on that. So one, when it comes to diagnosis and things and that, ADHD, ASD, autism, etc., things and that, they're very close in nature,
Yeah,
right? There's only a few factors that differentiate. It's very close, and still to today, people are getting misdiagnosed either side of that kind of spectrum and things and that, right? Um, and it's pretty scary that the testing hasn't changed much since when I was a kid, right? I mean, when I got re-diagnosed at 35 and that with combined ADHD, okay, the wording changed because originally I was ADD and then now I'm combined ADHD. I fall on both sides of the thing, and I think I think that kind of sums it up in the sense that through life we learn different ways of masking. Through life we learn different ways of coping, whether we know we're learning coping or not, right? And I mean, you can look at that from a trauma perspective. You can look at that from a neurodiversity perspective. You can look at it from a neurotypical perspective. We all learn to cope in certain ways, right? I mean, you all know they say, boys don't cry. We don't talk. We don't do. This kind of catches up with us when we're a bit older and kicks us into the butt just a little bit and things and that. Um, I mean, we can go so far as to talk about diagnosis in ladies as well being the most underrepresented category in neurodiversity and things because of what they call, what girls go through with regards to hormones and things, and it's ridiculous, right? So I think through our masking, and I had a really interesting discussion around this the other day. One of my friends turned around to me, who is out and proud about being ADHD. They're also a very big content creator and things and that. And they turned to me and I said, "Do you think there's any point in me getting another diagnosis?" I mean, it took me 5 years to get an ADHD diagnosis in this country, right? Like, I don't know, am I gonna be 60 by the time that I get a diagnosis and things and that, okay, I'm being really mean to the NHS, yeah, I apologize. Please. But at the same time, it's true, right? The waiting lists are astronomical, right? Unless you fork out a couple of grand to go private, but then what does that mean, right? Because now we're facing a different dilemma now, where if you do go for a private diagnosis, your local GPs and things are pushing back on being able to offer medication. It's like, well, you got private diagnosis, so you're privately medicated through them, but they don't have the power to do that. So yeah, but anyway, back to the topic. I think through that discussion with my friend, they turned around to me and they said, "Nate, we've known you quite a while now. We don't think it's going to do any benefit for you because you're such a high masker. You'll probably mask yourself out of the diagnosis of autism because you're very aware of your what's the right word I'm looking for? Let's say you're very aware of your neurodiversity,
yeah,
right? And as such, right, you're self-aware, which is great, but you're so self-aware that you adjust constantly when you're with people and when you're talking about things and stuff, so that if you take that test, are you gonna be true or are you gonna do one of your masks? And the thing is, how am I gonna know? Because I don't know 9 times out of 10 when I'm masking. If I'm just being if I'm just being, like, on auto mode, right?
Yeah.
If I'm just, you know, if I sit down and think about it or I process my day and that I can be very much, "Okay, cool, I can see where I went into mask X or mask Y," right? But sometimes I just flow with it, right? And it's natural because that's how I've learned how to walk through life, is to mask and cover up and to, try to be normal, right? My, my people around me probably would say I'm never normal, but that's a whole different topic. So to sit down for a test, and again, it's a test, right?
Yeah.
To be diagnosed and things like, because I've taken the home tests, and I'm not gonna lie to you, on my first go around with the ASD or autism test and things like that, it was very high. The second time it wasn't so much high. The third time it was less high, et cetera, right? Which is a perfect representation of, I'm aware of something. Okay, cool. I'm gonna put a mask on, try and cover it up, and so I don't look as such. This isn't the thought process of mine that I'm flipping a switch.
Yeah.
This is just a constant adjustment. So if you get a friend or someone really near and dear to me and say to me, "We can see it in you," but at the same time, we think that you're too high masking to be able to get a diagnosis on it. It's quite a strange one, right?
Yeah.
It's okay, cool. So what does that mean I need to do as a person and things and that? What does that mean I need to kind of challenge of myself and to be able to maybe take those walls down, to be able to see it and maybe identify it more so I can be more self-aware of myself so that I can, I don't know, better help other people, or so that I can, I don't know, be a better person for myself, be a better person around the people I love and care about and things and that. What does it mean to me and that, or is this just who I am? Obviously, we're always changing and always evolving and that. But
Yeah.
does that diagnosis, does that label, is that going to bring me anything different? Or is the fact that a number of people that I value and put my trust in have identified that in me or seen those traits in me, have said it to me, is that enough?
Yeah.
What difference is it going to do? Is my GP down the road going to treat me any differently or any better and things that because now I'm ADHD instead of combined ADHD, when they haven't really done anything different from my ADHD. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, cool. We're trying to drive change by doing these things, right? These podcasts and community and TikTok and socials and things that are right. We're having panels and discussions and we're trying to change it on broad spectrums and things like that. And it's like, most people, when they look at me and I say I'm ADHD, they still get that instant thing. Oh, this guy can't focus. This guy can't do this. This guy can't do that. You know, you'd be surprised the type of people that have walked up to me after a talk and things, and they're like, "I didn't think someone could hold a conversation for that long. I thought you'd be like away with the squirrels, like within like 5 minutes or something." Or like, wow, I run a business and things and that. And after your conversation, I actually see a lot of that within myself, but I couldn't believe it because I always thought it was a really negative thing to be ADHD or something as such. And I mean, it's the same narrative I've heard since I was a kid that's still being perpetrated today around
Yeah.
one of them. So it's like, okay, cool. I'm 40 years old now. What is it going to really change for me in a perspective of, okay, now I'm going to get an autism diagnosis,
Yeah.
potentially I need a dyslexia diagnosis and things like that. Although I'm pretty aware about dyslexia, so I know what tools I can look out for online or tech wise and that to help me adjust my whatever it is, right? Which is probably going to be much easier and better than going to the NHS to ask them to help me with tools and things and that for something and that. right?
Probably.
Where I can branch out and go into the community and say, hey, this is me. I have these traits and things and that. Can we talk about it?
Yeah,
Can I get some different people's perspectives so that I can see how I can better manage or I can better learn about myself or something as such, right?
yeah. Cool.
Can we take that back away from an institution and make it more community based or crowdfunded based or something as such? Would that add more value to it than trying to get a diagnosis through some institution that doesn't really know about neurodiversity except for what they've read in a book somewhere
Yeah, no,
from like
that's
1800s or something?
that no, that's very, very true.
Yet again, I'd like to echo these are my own personal opinions of myself, my own views. I don't think one size fits all. I very much believe in, everyone should decide on what best suits their journey, what best suits their narrative, and obviously, what best suits your life and your situation at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Um, for me, at this point, as I said, I'm still learning what it means to be a true a combined ADHDer or just Nathan at the end of the day, which I'd love our world to be one day, which is a no label place where we're all just embraced, which sounds very hippy dippy, and I've got no issue with that. But it'd be great if little kids could grow up in a place and that where they don't have to be diagnosed and that just to be able to be accommodated and treated as individuals and seen and heard. And but unfortunately at the moment, we kind of need a voice and a loud enough voice out there and to be able to kind of break down some of these barriers, break down some of these walls that societal institutions have in place and are around neurodiversity and that. And whilst I do believe we have things that we struggle with, I don't think that's individual to us. Neurotypicals battle with things daily as well, right? Mental health is not a neurodiverse specific condition. It crosses all boundaries,
yeah, no,
intersectionality there. Um, we just feel things a little bit more extreme, unfortunately. Sometimes that's a good thing, right? Our passion is one of our greatest tools, I'd say, in that. I mean, it's why you got people like Darren out here at the moment and exposing themselves, putting them out there, doing podcasts on topics that still carry massive stigma in certain fields and areas and that. I mean, it's why we have a bunch of people tackling corporates and tackling the creative industries and things right now and that, trying to talk about this by opening up about themselves, which is scary to do, right?
yeah.
Because once you're kind of out there, you can't really put it back in the box again,
This
right?
this is very, very true.
So yeah.
It, it's so different for so many people or for everybody. The journey that they take, um, and all the influences and everything can make such a profound difference in how they cope and their symptoms and how things present. And like you said, it's kind of like it's just knowing yourself and that sort of self-awareness, which is the biggest thing. And when you like you said a second ago about trying to get the help and everything and all the information diagnosed from the NHS, which is, as we know, is battling their own demons at the moment. So so there's a lot of waiting list you can go on to get all these diagnoses that you might need. However, going to, like, be it social media, and just talking to other people about it and relating to what they're going through, and vice versa, it can help so much. And I never thought I'd ever said that, because I've always been someone who's, don't go to social media, don't go to Google to get your diagnosis and stuff like that. But you've got nowhere else to go, so you're going to have to go there if you want to make a difference in your life. And getting those coping strategies and coping mechanisms, you know, do you really need a diagnosis for that to put it in place? No, you don't. I become I overstimulated. I got sensory issues, which I never knew I have, but I know because of the circumstances they're in. I do get sensory overload, and very quickly. Do I need to know that I've got sensory processing disorder, along with the ADHD? I don't. I, I, I put the things in place. I wear the headphones. I carry these to concentrate and help calm me down. I know when it's going to happen, and organize myself. I have things in place to help counteract that. Having a diagnosis is not going to change that.
I think just touching on that real quick for our audience as well. It's also all right if you don't have that in place, right? It doesn't mean you failed if you don't have it in place.
No,
So when I
absolutely.
spoke about earlier about being able to forgive ourselves once I got my diagnosis, and what I meant was, you know, all the things that I see normal people having in place and being able to do, as simple as going out the house or doing a task straight away or something as such and things. And this builds up resentment over the years that I can't just do it the same way as somebody else can do it. But this isn't a individually experienced kind of situation and that, right? This is across the board and that. It's just to the extreme of what looks like to somebody else as potentially, and I hate this word. Anybody that knows me will know I hate this word quite dramatically in that. But yeah, procrastination, which gets labeled onto ADHD, is every other day, when in fact it's decision paralysis, right? Which means that when we're trying to prioritize to do basic tasks, say for example, I've got to do the dishes today, I've got to do the cleaning today, I've got to do a bit of hoovering and laundry, and yes, like using these things. Sometimes the prioritization part of that in my head, and that goes like, okay, where do I start? And I get stuck. And then what looks like to everybody else is like, oh, he's been sitting at his desk or he's been sitting on that chair for the last 2 hours and like just chilling. Meanwhile, in my head, I've got a storm going on of trying to decide what is going on, to the point that it's kind of paralyzed me in place, that I don't know where to start. Right? That's the differential.
Yeah,
Right? Procrastination is a choice of, hey, I'm going to veg out today. I'm going to chill on the sofa and I'm going to watch me. I don't know what your favorite series is at the moment tonight, but yeah, I'm going to chill out and watch that all day.
yeah.
Right?
And you don't care and you don't feel bad about it because that's what you want to do.
Exactly. Whereas we personally, well, I shouldn't say we because I don't want to speak for other people now, but to me, that's me failing every second within my head. And then comes the mental health side of things that kicks in after that. Oh, okay, cool. So you failed today. So you don't deserve to have a reward, which then filters into like self-care or to like looking after yourself in other ways and things like that. Or, yeah, you're not allowed to leave the house today to go meet up with friends and that because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Right. And these are things that a lot of people don't experience and can't necessarily comprehend a lot of the time and things like that. But when you've grown up with something like that,
Yeah,
it's quite extreme, and it takes a lot of unpacking. So that's why for me, it's like, okay, I'm still learning to unpack what that looks like for me as, okay, this is Nathyn, the non-ADHD. This is Nathyn, the ADHD. This is Nathyn with mental health, and this is Nathyn with all these other things. And that, so which is which? And what does that look like for me? And now I want to go add another label on, potentially, of autism or ASD or dyslexia and things. And now I've got to unpack that as well. And what does that look like for me and things? And do I have enough room in my head at the moment to be able to do that? Probably, but sensibly, I should probably start to unpack this first, clear out this closet a little bit and things like that, and then move on, right?
yeah,
And I think that's the hard part for people, or sorry if I'm speaking too loud again. When I get passionate, I tend to, yeah, my volume raises just a little bit. But that's what I mean by forgiving ourselves, right? We're not all, we're never going to be perfect, right? I mean, there is no 100%. What 100% usually means is like, okay, we can give 95%, but we still need to hold 5% back for ourselves and our spoons and that to make sure we can get through the basic day of getting out of bed and doing the normal stuff, right? And we are going to fail. Everyone fails at the basics and things. But when you've been told all your life that you have this thing that nobody else has, or that other people have, or that you, I don't know if they're still telling kids with that are getting diagnosed as ADHD that they're going to be low geniuses, but they're never going to be able to tap into it, which I think is really
Yeah.
debilitating
Yeah.
and heartbreaking, right? Why put that expectation on that, right? Why not let's adapt the world in that rather than expecting a fish to climb a tree? Let's put them in a pond and see how they go from there, and then into something bigger after that, right? So when I talk about forgiving ourselves from a diagnosis perspective or getting a label and forgiving ourselves, it's that. It's, yeah, I might not be able to do this today, but tomorrow I might be able to boss it.
Yeah.
And then on a really good day, I know I can do 3 weeks worth of work in a day versus somebody that's never going to be able to do that because of my hyper focus. So there's a positive. It's not always positive though, because sometimes I hyper focus on something really negative from my past and it cripples me for a day or two. And it makes me want to hide from the world. Right. And that's where the intersectionality kind of comes in regards to kind of neurodiversity and mental health that we really need to talk more about. And we really need to, learn to define the two as two separates and that, because still, unfortunately, people are seeing neurodiversity as a mental health issue versus it just being neurodiversity and a neurodiverse person experiencing a mental health issue or complexity.
Yeah.
And once we can get into that conversation and once we can kind of separate those two out, and I think that's where we can really find the individuals and address things from an individual perspective and help people. So again, I think what the label brings us or what the diagnosis brings us from a personal perspective is the opportunity to learn about ourselves. It's the opportunity to forgive ourselves for things that we've beaten ourselves up about growing up, as well as ongoing that we might not be great at, right? But it also allows us to learn the things that we are good at. And shows us if we truly deep dive in ourselves and that it brings out the things that I never realized, but wow, that's why I'm still alive today. Is because I was able to chameleon my way through that, or what's a term that people love using, fake it till we make it, right? Jack of all trades, master of none, and things and that. I mean, yeah, you know. So I think we all need to learn to kind of just that self-awareness of being able to forgive yourself, and what is the true reason you're going in to get a label or a diagnosis and things like that, because it's going to start with yourself. The self-awareness has got to also start with yourself before you can expect anyone else to kind of help us or to put accommodations in place. Because unfortunately, the world is not there yet, right?
Yeah.
The world is not caught up in ways. We're trying, and a lot of people are talking out finally. And I think at the moment they're calling it the neurodiversity epidemic, which is the word I'd like to use. I can't, but I don't know what the censorship is on here.
You go for it, man. You go for it.
No, I'm good. I'm good. But it's not the fact that there's an epidemic. It's that people are finally learning to, unmask. People are learning how to talk. People are learning how to open up and out about, their experiences. I think I've mentioned this before. I mean, my father was in his 60s when he got diagnosed with dyslexia. He's lived all his life with it, right? What was his point for needing it at 60 and that? But it gave him the opportunity to learn to forgive himself for things that he always thought he was broken about. And he got to see the world in a different light, right? And
Yeah.
and that's what it's about. When it comes to the workplace, now this is a whole different topic and things, but from a diagnosis perspective, what it means for the workplace is it affords you protections, right? The Disability and Equality Act of 2010. This is something everyone needs to learn, everyone needs to talk about, everyone needs to shout about, and
Absolutely.
everyone needs, especially if you're on the neurodiverse spectrum, or if you are, you struggle with mental health or anything as such. This affords you protection within your workplace, and helps in regards to protecting you from any sort of stigma-based conversations or anything as such. And from a diagnosis perspective and that, they'll always use the fact that you don't have a diagnosis against you So even if you said, "Oh, I'm currently on the journey," or I'm of the mindset that I am ADHD and things and that, some places will use that against you by saying that you don't have a diagnosis, so you don't fall under those protective acts and things like that. It's not necessarily true. Please look towards your unions and reps and everybody else and that. They are there. And if not, reach out to your community and that. There's always someone that knows something about it and can help. But that is the big difference. Having a diagnosis in the workplace is the fact that it affords you accommodations, it affords you protection, and means that you're entitled to be who you are, and not have to conform to certain stigmas and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's, like in the workplace, it's you got to be able to. It's easier to talk when there's you feel comfortable to talk. I know we've had this conversation before. We need to speak up, but at the same time, your managers and the companies need to be able to create the environment for you to feel comfortable to talk as
100%.
well. I've spoken to a few people since then, and I think you've also got to realize that they might want to help, they might want to be able to do things for you, but they don't know. They might not have had all the training and things like that. So if you go in and say, I've got ADHD, just letting you know, and they don't know much about ADHD, so how are they going to find out? They may go onto the NHS website and look at the signs and symptoms of ADHD.
Please don't do
You're not getting the job if they do that. Okay,
it. Yeah.
that's that's bless NHS, but that does not help at all whatsoever. So you're better off telling them about your ADHD and about how it affects you and the strategies you have in place and what you might need in a workplace as well. So you educate them as well, and chances are that's not going to sound as bad as what they're going to read and interpret themselves. So
I think in a couple of years that I've been talking about diversity, inclusion, and focusing on neurodiversity as a whole, I think from the very first day that was something I did, which was take a screenshot and put it up in that about the NHS's version of what ADHD looks like in a person. And I think it's still exactly the same. And I think my whole argument was I wouldn't hire me. If that is what ADHD is, and that I probably wouldn't hire me if I came to an interview process. And that was my whole argument was if this is what our healthcare system is looking at us as, then what is the point, right? Because these are the people that are supposed to be helping us,
yeah,
or being able to at least afford us some sort of accommodations, or understanding if we bring our employer or something as such in it, right? And if you read that description just of ADHD, I'm not talking about any of the other neurodiversity complexities or anything as such in that, or characteristics, and that it's awful, right? I mean, you'd swear we sat by a window watching squirrels run past all day long, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
and that's the totality of it, isn't it?
The,
And
what,
like I say,
one of the things on it, it says words to the effects of um, acts in a dangerous manner without having any consideration to anybody else. I'm like,
impulse control.
do I? I don't think I do. I think I'm overcautious. I've got to be honest with you. I don't. It's like,
I think that they've taken a really quick snapshot
yeah,
of worst case scenarios and painted it. And look, let's be real, right? There's a whole generation of unhurt people out there, right? Where they haven't been able to get the help or considerations that they require, and have been fobbed off, and there are people that have sought different ways, self-medicating, adrenaline rushes, whatever, and that to kind of chase their brain and chase their understanding of who they are, because nobody's ever informed them or educated or anything as such, or taken the time to kind of instill any different narratives and that around what it means to be neurodiverse.
yeah,
So, hey, I'm broken. I might as well just go and stay broken, right? Wrong. You're not broken. You just see the world differently. And if someone had taken the time or spent the time with you to show you that, hey, there's a place for you, and this is what your brain can do, and things and that. And yes, there's going to be times when it's going to not be able to, but that's okay because you're human, right? You're an individual, right? It's the whole definition of being an individual, and that is being unique and seeing things differently, and not being a sheep. And yet, because we're neurodiverse now, we're broken because we see the world differently, we act differently, and things that it doesn't make any logical sense.
Yeah.
So please don't read the definition of an ADHD on the NHS website, especially for any kind of, interviews or recruitment process or anything as such. But at the end of the day, just touching on what you said real quick, if you do decide to open up and out about your neurodiversity within the workplace and that, you're very brave. You're courageous, right? At the end of the day, you're helping start the conversation and you're helping to start a better, more inclusive journey for the next person that comes along. It's not fair to ask. Not everybody has to be a trailblazer and things like that. But here's the thing. If your manager even has the moment or the perspective to say, okay, cool, I don't understand this, I'm going to go ask HR. Remind them, HR policies are exactly that. They're policy. They're not law. They're supposed to be a guideline to start a conversation and then to look broader, right? Just because it says everyone should be, doesn't mean everyone has to be like that,
Yeah.
right? It should be a broader conversation and an exploration of, okay, how can we, better work together? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How can I put you in a place of strength, right? And you don't have to have the answers, right? You just need to also be willing enough to be open-minded enough about yourself and that to want to look as well, which might not be as easy because you've also been fed a narrative for your whole life. Or maybe it is, but just give yourself that space. Take the time to process and things. And just because one manager is maybe negative about it doesn't mean they all are. And this is a whole different topic, but it's the difference between a leadership mindset and a management mindset. And hopefully you all have leaders in front of you that want to put you in places of strength and not weakness. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
No, I mean that is true. And when you work as well, things change. Things can change just organically. I mean, where I work now, I mean, it's getting busier, and we've got less staff, so I'm dealing with a lot more. So now I'm finding where I wasn't struggling at certain things before, I am now. Although everything's exactly the same, it's just more people around me. That is it. Um, so things can just change. So you might add things along the way. Um, and you might go to a job, you might go somewhere, and because you've never done it before, you don't know everything about how it's going to affect you. So you'll be learning as well. So
I think January is always a difficult time for most kind of companies, and yours especially, because you've just had a whole bunch of sort of Christmas temps and people and
yeah,
things in place and that to help and that, and then all of a sudden January comes along, and it's like, oh, now we got to look at our bottom line, so now we need to drop all these temps and staff and things and that, and then yeah, I've got some friends that work in the same areas and things and that, and they're experiencing the same thing. That they've gone from having 4 people on a shift, that kind of, especially on Sundays, that kind of, what was it, I think they work sort of 12 till 8, but you can only really do the job from 4 till 8 because that's when the shop's closed and things like that. But now they're doing it all by themselves.
yeah,
And it's like, well, I used to have support, I used to have help, and I used to have things, but now I've got to do this all by myself, and they're having to do like 1,000 tickets or whatever and things. And it's like, okay, so that extreme change is definitely a topic to be discussed and prior discussed and planned, especially if you have a neurodiverse staff and things like that, because change is one of our things, right? It's not that we can't handle change. It's not that we can't persevere through change. It's, can leadership management be mindful enough to pre-warn us about the change that's coming rather than telling us a day late and $1 short that, hey, there's going to be some change.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then expecting us all to be like, oh, that's great. Rather than preempting and saying, okay, cool, so we're going to struggle a little bit on Sunday and things. We've got a short staff and that. Are you going to be all right with this? Or is your leadership going to push up their sleeves and jump in and help? Anyway,
yeah.
whole different topic.
But I mean, even with that, it's when you're speaking at work to your manager about things, you might not have 2 or 3 diagnoses. You've got what you've got. You've got your struggles, you know what you struggle with, so you talk about that, and you ask for support or whatever regarding those struggles. Um, so it's but you don't have to know everything to ask. You don't have to think of your ADHD as a superpower to ask. Um, I will talk to anyone about my ADHD, my work, anyone. People out the street, I hate my ADHD. I hate it. I hate it. I don't want it. Don't like it. Don't want it. You might love yours. It's great. No problem at all. Um, but I can't stand mine and I don't want it. It's given me the answers. I know how to put things into place and to cope with certain situations and stuff like that, which is great. Um, but I hate it. But I will talk about it. I won't shy away from it. And I will try to help to educate people as much as I can. So you don't have to be in this great position to go to talking. You
I think this is a great thing about this type of conversation, because so this is the difference, and myself and Darren, and I apologize if I speak for you, Darren, for a moment,
you
but
speak. That's
you
fine.
know, Darren has his experience with his ADHD, and I have my experience with my ADHD, for example, right? And I spent most of my young years, right up until probably my 30s, and that vilifying my ADHD and staying away from that side of my head, or at least that's what I believed I was doing, right? If you can believe you have that type of control of your head, right? And hiding in careers where I didn't have to rely on academics or rely on trusting my brain to get me through the day as such, and that, right? I hid in creative jobs and things like that, where that weirdness or that differential was the thing that kind of made the job for me, and that, or made the career for me and things, until I was thrust into a corporate space, and I was like, oh God, what do I do now? Now I've got to trust my brain. And then getting that re-diagnosis and then learning, hey, hang on, my ADHD has been there every step of the way with me, and has helped me morph into every job role I've done, has got me out of some really strange sticky points in my life, has been able to do a number of things. Are there complexities with that? 100%. Are there payoffs for being able to hyper focus and everything that? 100%. Does my dysregulation impact my life? Yes, it does. Right. But I've been able to afford myself a different view on my ADHD. And that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. That's just my journey. Right. Did I start off looking at, when I started with diversity inclusion, with the whole, ooh, neurodiversity could be a superpower, potentially. Some people might know, right? Because I was so tired, and this isn't a knock on anybody, but I was so tired of hearing the negatives about neurodiversity. And especially ADHD. I was so tired of hearing the negatives and that, because it's the only narrative I'd ever heard. I still can't remember the person's name on YouTube, and I apologize for this creator and things that is out there and that. But until I watched your content on YouTube and that, and there was a positive spin on ADHD, and I share this with everyone, the thing that changed my perspective on ADHD was, what does it mean to be a fidget, right? Because that was the thing that used to get me in trouble the most as a child, was that I used to fidget, right? Especially in classrooms, right? Or talk out or whatever. And I watched this content on YouTube, and this person had this animated thing on why do ADHDers fidget. And it just made me stop in my tracks and look at it and be like, hang on. Yeah, when I tell people, yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm paying attention to you and I'm looking straight at you and I'm not doing anything with my hands. I'm not doing this now, by the way, Darren. I'd actually be away kind of with the fairies or whatever and things, and I'd be thinking about a million different things and trying to focus on you. Whereas when I'm fidgeting, all I'm focused on is the fidget and you, which means I'm actually paying more attention to you and I'm actually
Yeah.
listening more. But I've been told all my life that, hey, if you're a fidget, or if you're in a board meeting, or if you in any kind of situation, you're fidgeting with something, you're rude, you're disrespectful, you're whatever, right? Your brain doesn't function and things and that. And meanwhile, if I sit there with a fidget, or I sit there and I don't know, I'm watching TV and you're talking to me, I'm actually paying more attention to you than if I was sitting there with full on eye contact, nothing in my hands and that, and trying to listen and things and that. I probably wouldn't be able to tell you what you said to me 5 minutes later. Whereas if I sit there with my fidget, or I sit there and I listen to something else, or whatever, and that, I'm only focused on two things. And
Yeah.
that small thing changed that whole kind of journey for me, and that whole kind of narrative around it. And it's like, wait, but it's we're wrong about this one thing. And it made me feel so strong about my ADHD about this one thing, then what else are they wrong about?
Yeah.
And this is where I'll always champion lived experience over other experience and things like that. But again,
Yes.
that's a whole other, I'm sure that we could have a whole kind
We
of
we
discussion
could.
topic on that.
We could.
And
We could. I was gonna say that when I when I was younger, it was all inattentive. I couldn't pay attention, and the fidget thing never. There was never a connection there. I could not pay attention. Even if I sat there looking at you or the teacher, my head's gone. It's away, but I'm still looking. But now I understand things, and when you say about the using a fidget thing to help concentrate, I get you.
Mhm.
I get you. It's amazing
My
what it
hands
can
under the
do.
table fidgeting, which sounds very dodgy, but I don't mean it in that way. But
Just
I still fall in that trap when I get into a meeting and that I hide my hands under the table and I fidget under the table so I don't disturb anybody else. Because obviously there's still a self-awareness about it and a mindfulness about it, right? Because my fidgeting might help me, but it might distract somebody else,
yeah,
right? But that's my personal thinking in that, right? And I'm going to give some credit here on that. So from my previous career and things, I'll never forget it. I had a conversation with a manager, and I'm going to give a shout out Jerry Riley, right? And I don't know how we started talking about my neurodiversity and things. And I think I got put on a PIP, to be honest with you, a personal improvement plan, because I was doing
yeah,
really the job, right? Because, yeah, the job was so process driven and that there were so many processes. I couldn't find the best practice in this job, right? I didn't know how to kind of prioritize it as such. Until I got put on a PIP and everything kind of got laid out for me, and this manager spent time with me and laid it out for me and things in such a way I was actually able to achieve like high achieving whilst I was on a PIP, which makes no sense, right? And it was something that was a little bit odd and strange. And then through that, I was like, I found this other thing, and about someone talking about fidgets and like concentration, and maybe this will help. And I'll never forget, it was the first manager to allow me to take a fidget or something to a meeting in a corporate space, and it helped. It just kind of, I know it's something that seems so small and so inconsequential, but it kind of started that journey for me of looking at other things that then kind of changed my perspective on neurodiversity, ADHD, and wanting to then help change the narratives for other people and create more inclusive journeys for other people. So yeah, shout out Jerry Riley. And, you know, yeah. Hmm.
it's amazing how things can change in a journey, depending who you've talked to, things you've read or watched, or the boss, good boss, the bad boss, whatever. It can change. I know with this podcast, my thought process around certain areas. I've gone round and round. I've completely gone, you know, changed so many things how I thought from the very beginning to where I am now. But that's just from talking to people in similar situations who go through similar sort of things, and it's educating me, and and I understand that everyone is different. Everyone's got their own story, and a way of dealing with things and things like that. So there's a lot of things. It's not always a right or wrong way. It's just how you deal with it. And if it's working for you, it's working for you. Don't let anyone tell you different.
Sorry, that was exactly the point I was trying to make. I forgot the point of that. Was that you can put two of us together, and these are the conversations that matter. And just because I have one experience of ADHD doesn't make my experience right or wrong. As with Darren's and that, right? So mine's
I wouldn't say 1,000% positive. I'm still learning, right, as I go on and things and that. Um, and Darren's still learning his own journey and things and that. But these type of conversations where we can come together and we can help offer each other different perspectives and things, this is what drives change, right? At the end of the day. So there's no right or wrong when you're learning. They always say what the best learning comes from failure and things. And that I wish there
Yeah.
was a little bit less failure, but at the same time, I learned from Darren, and hopefully I can offer some perspective, with him and his
Absolutely.
his journey, and hopefully we can help drive more inclusive narratives for the people listening to these stories and the podcasts and things like that. So yeah, that at the end of the day is my perspective on it. And when it comes to, do you need multiple diagnoses at the end of the day? That's up to you. Does it afford you anything? That's up to you. Does it give you more opportunity to learn more about yourself? Heck yeah, potentially. And at the end of the day, if you can be happier with the person you are, what's wrong with that? Right? It doesn't have to be for everybody else. It doesn't need to be for everybody else. And I'd say if you've got partners and spouses and things, and then you might want to share with it might make life a little bit easier. I'm not gonna lie. But if we can all learn how to communicate a bit better, if we can all have a bit more self-awareness about ourselves and things like that, potentially, we can drive this change together, and we can kind of get the message out. And yeah, just maybe we can create a world at the end of the day, I know, very idealistic, where we don't need these labels. And we can just be Nathyn Darren having a coffee chat, rather than Nathyn Darren discussing labels and everything else. But for the time being, this is where we're at. And hopefully it's added a new perspective, and hopefully we've helped someone somewhere. And yeah, I've really appreciated my time with you, Derek, today.
No,
Thanks so much.
it's been great. It's always been great having you on. It's the second time, but you have a really nice insight on everything, and a way of looking at things and way of approaching things. And verbally, you get it over better than I can. I'm rubbish at speaking. God knows why I do a podcast, but so it's really nice to listen to and hear you talk. So
Thank you so much. And thank you again for having me on. And I look forward to our next discussion and things. Next,
absolutely.
we'll be discussing world health. And yeah, no, I'm joking.
Well, you never know. You never know. But no, I mean, thank you for coming on again. Thank you for everybody for listening. Nathyn, just for everybody, tell them about yourself. Who are you? What did you do?
So, as if you're joining now, my name is Nate. How are you doing? No. So what I currently do is I work for myself. I do consulting and freelancing, both around diversity inclusion, especially focusing on neurodiversity, as well as change management, risk mitigation, etc. for companies. Got a couple other podcasts lined up and things and that. So yeah, if anyone wants to look me up on that, Nathyn Kerchhoff at ndksolutions.co.uk. Also on LinkedIn, Nathyn Kerchhoff. I'm sure Darren will tag me in at the bottom of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch the space. And yeah, if anyone needs anything, if anyone ever needs just to talk or needs somebody to listen to them in that, please don't hesitate. Reach out. You're not alone. You're not on an island. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. As always, guys, be good, be kind, and remember, you're not alone. Thank you.